You know, I always thought my legacy was through my photographs, through my videos, through all this amazing work I've been able to create. But honestly, my legacy is through my friendships and my relationships.
Mattson Culbert, welcome to the Host Stevie Surf Show.
Hello, my fellow Santa Barbarian Shane Orr. Thank you for having me. Hello, friends. It's Mattson.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you on here. I'm going to be your host, Shane Orr. And I've known Mattson for at least 6 or 7 years, I think.
Pretty close. Right? 2018.
Yeah.
Yeah, so almost 6 years.
Yeah, he's a dear friend of mine. We're both from the 805. Definitely crossed paths back then too, but we weren't. You were
wasn't realizing it at the time that Super Shane, the grommet, was in my life also.
Yeah, I'm certain I saw you shooting Nathaniel.
Not only shooting, but probably coming into the CI shop in Santa Barbara and hanging out. And obviously, for any of you guys that don't know, me and Shane have a lot of similarities to where we grew up. I was born in Santa Barbara. He was born in Goleta, Santa Barbara. A lot of the kids that used to work for me also are good friends of his and kids that I have not only filmed but shot with. So we have a lot of similarities there.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure we were at RingCon at the same time dozens of times, and your dad's friends with my best friend's dad. And
yeah, actually, there's a funny story we'll tell you guys about. But one of Shane's best friends, you know, who runs Surf and Wear, but it's called the Beach House now. His friend Grace and his dad, Roger Nance, he actually used to surf with my dad in the late 70s and early 80s. And my dad was a police officer in Santa Barbara from 71 to 81. And then he retired because of some herniated discs in his back. So for a while he was getting back on his feet and looking for other jobs, he actually worked at the shop with Roger in like late 81 and early 1982 until he went back to doing security stuff again. So that's kind of a weird connection that we have. And then, you know, I'm friends with his ex-girlfriend who, you know, when she told me, oh yeah, my boyfriend at the time, he's from Santa Barbara, you might know him. And then all the similarities and all the people that we know, it's pretty crazy, you know. Santa Barbara's a small surf town, so
yeah. If
you know someone, you probably know their brother, you probably know their dad or their uncle, especially if they surf. So,
and I met you through my ex. You were kind of her surf photographer for a while, and then I'd come down and steal some photos.
I do have to talk a little trash to you because Shane for many years said he would never surf Tourmaline, which he basically lives down the street from, but you know, this last June, I finally saw you out there and you're like, the sand is not good anywhere else. And just so happens, if you guys have seen Sammy the surfing seal, I'm sure you saw all the footage of him from the drone dude, but I was in the water that day and I got footage of him, which we'll show later on. But Shane was right there next to me watching me film this seal jump on this girl's surfboard, just hanging out, Sammy the seal. So it was just kind of funny that I saw you out there that same day.
Yeah, I swore off tourmaline for years. I'd surf it like two times a year maybe, and then I went down for a contest to watch my buddy Nico surf in it.
Yeah,
and him and this guy Ricky were like hanging heels, and it was terrible conditions. I decided not to do the contest, and then these guys are like hanging heels and hanging 10. I'm like, oh God, I need to step my game up so much.
That's
I didn't even think it'd be contestable, and these guys are getting like sick rides, and I was like, all right, I guess I gotta like put in some work and figure out how to longboard terrible waves, because like I could longboard RingCon with some very good people and like hold my own, but at a bad wave like tourmaline or something, I'm like so out of my element.
That's
so
funny.
I and Nico and I like competing a bunch, so I definitely want to get better.
It's funny because your friend Nico, who I only met about a year ago, I would say it was April or May of last year, literally knows all of the people I shoot with and knows you really well and knows all these people, but I had never actually met him or crossed paths. And then my friend Philip, who made a YouTube video spotlight on me last year, goes, oh, my friend Nico's going to go out. And then I was like, man, you look familiar. And then once we started talking about, he goes, wait, you know Shane, don't you? And you know Brittany, and you know this person and this person. I'm like, oh my gosh, we literally know all the same people, and Natalie. So it's just funny that we had never crossed paths at that point. But now I see him all the time because, I surf out there all the time.
Yeah, we weren't even like very close friends until I guess like 2 years ago, and we just figured out that we lived next to each other, and we were like, hey, we should probably start surfing together.
Yeah.
Play pool like 2 nights a week now, and talk pretty much every day, and surf on weekends when he can, because he's got a 9 to 5.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and to be honest, if you guys have probably seen Shane surf, he's a really good shortboarder, but he actually is a really decent longboarder too. Really and if you saw the ads earlier this year for host Stevie's calf leash, I shot those of him in the water, of not only the video but the photos and some of his funny little outtakes. So there's another thing where we've helped each other out.
Yeah, it was really good working for you. You made it really easy to model.
I'm easy, man.
I hadn't done much modeling, so it was like, all right, this is kind of awkward and weird for me.
Well, I think since we've already known each other and we're friends, like, you know what to expect from me, and I know where you want to be and where you always like to spray me in the face with a good little turn, so I was expecting one of those at least once or twice.
And I got you.
Yeah, we'll get a clip of that in the video. Don't worry.
I definitely got you. So how did you get into surf photography? What was like?
Well, it's kind of a little bit of a progression. I would say I started as an artist as a young kid, but having a surfer dad, my grandparents lived on the beach, basically across the street from Thousand Steps, which, if you guys know anything about Santa Barbara, if you don't, you're going to have to look it up. But Santa Barbara City College is really close to a really playful, fun wave called Ledbetter, which I'm sure you know and you have surfed at some point, which is probably about 100, 150 yards from my grandparents' house. So at the time, growing up. So, I would go down and watch my dad surf. I've always been around the surf culture and all that stuff. My other grandparents lived on the beach too, in Cayucas, which is Central California. It's 5 miles north of Morro Bay. And, I've always been around the beach, and then, started boogie boarding, surfing. And then, I have a lot of good friends that surf that were sponsored, especially in the late 90s. None of them had a photographer or videographer. I was an artist, and then it turned into photography. And then I ended up going to film school in 2002 at Brooks Institute of Photography. I went to the film school, which was in Ventura. It's closed now. And the main school was actually in Santa Barbara too. But, one thing led to another. I've always been obsessed with surf videos, Surfer Magazine, Surfer's Journal, any sort of surf books. I just love the visuals, being a visual person, doing art growing up. It just led to eventually me picking up a camera at 21. Kind of one thing led to another, and here I am, 25. It'll be 26 years in November, which is really weird to say because I'm 46 now. I'll be 47 in July, but a lot of people probably thought that I was wasting my time shooting surfing and waves, that long ago, but I'm still doing it, and it's given me such a rich life. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think, and then having a lot of friends I grew up surfing with that are really, really good surfers, it helped. So it helped me hone my skills. And then one thing I'll tell you, or anybody knows, if you have a camera and you have friends that surf, it's extremely rare, if ever, that someone doesn't want you to film them or take a picture of them, especially in today's culture. Mm-hmm. But I was shooting all this stuff late 90s, early 2000s of my friends, and it's just funny when I think about it now, and that's all film, and then real early, home video, like mini DV tapes and stuff like that. And, there was times where my friends were like, put it away, like, we don't need pictures or whatever. And now they all thank me in their mid-40s because they're like, dude, you have our whole, our late teens and our 20s to look back at because you just always had a camera with you. And now I have thousands and thousands of not only photos, but, pictures, like negative slides, digital photos, and tons of video footage. So we'll get into that in a little bit, but, I want to do something with all that.
And, it's it's great that you pick up a camera, and it's literally how Steve and I know each other. He was like, yo, do you want me to shoot you on the beach? And I was like, yeah, why would I say no to that? Yeah. Like, I'm so stoked for so many of those sessions that would have gone uncaptured if it weren't for him just being like, yeah, I'll shoot, I'm down.
Yeah, exactly.
It's great to capture memories like that and be able to preserve them for your friends. I know you have a really good memory for dates, and we've talked about that sort of thing.
Oh yeah. It's funny because I was thinking about, as I've been going over like my portfolio and looking at things, my goal for the end of next year is to do a collective of all my work, a book of the surf and the Southern California surf culture and beach culture and significant swell.
Our camera died. We were just talking about how...
Yeah, we lost 18 minutes of footage, by the way.
Yep.
Don't worry, I got plenty of stories for you.
Yeah, we were talking about how photography is such a great way of preserving memories, and I know you're trying to put together a book in the next year to kind of compile all of these adventures, swell events, people you've met along the way, and why don't you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. I guess we'll get into it at the end also, but kind of my ultimate goal, I think, looking back at shooting for 25 years now, it'll be 26 in November. When I started shooting, I was 21 years old, so I'll be 47 in July. And just looking through my portfolio of not just negatives from shooting film and slides, digital photos, old videotapes, digital videotapes, water footage, everything. Like, I just want to compile kind of like my love letter to Southern California. I mean, there's a little bit of Central California in there also because it's very dear to me also because my grandmother... she basically lived on the beach, and my grandfather too, but he passed away when I was pretty young, in Cayucas, which is 5 miles north of Morro Bay. But Santa Barbara and Central California are definitely an important part of that also. But I just want to share like kind of a collective of all this stuff, not just my friends, like how we started sleeping on floors, chasing swells, significant swells here in California, which you know me well enough, and anybody that knows me really well, I have a thing for dates and remembering swells better than just about anyone, because I have a really good memory. But, just even like how much certain beaches have changed over time with, the erosion, all these king tides and all the significant things that have happened, a ton of rain, extreme droughts, all this stuff. So, not just surfing, but the waves, the beaches, the whole beach culture, and I think I had said before, like some of my friends, they're third generation surfers or second generation surfers. And, I have a good friend who I grew up with, his dad's in his late 70s, still surfs. He surfs and shapes. His kids surf. I have pictures of them when they're in diapers at the beach, and I'd love to get everybody together this summer at some point. Because I can show like how much we've changed over time too, and it's weird because it is true. Like it's like don't blink because it might just happen really fast, and here I am at only a few years away from being 50, which is a strange thing to say, but it really does happen quickly, especially in the world that we live in now. Everything's just, life moves so fast. So if I can make a giant coffee table book of all these great experiences, people I've known from, friends that were professional surfers to good underground surfers, or just people that were just, good friends, and all these amazing swells over the years. It'll be kind of my love letter to California. And, my family's been in California for a very long time. I'm sixth generation born and raised. My dad's ancestors, the white side, so I'm half Mexican-American. My mom's Mexican-American. And, my mom's family, I think we go back as far as late 1700s, because I have Native American and Mexican ancestry. So I don't know, my roots run very deep in California. And then on my dad's side, even though it's, the white and the Irish side, they came to California in 1830. So, my blood runs very deep in the culture here. And, my grandparents on both sides, my grandpa on my mom's side and then my grandma on my dad's side, they used to document and shoot stuff. And, I have some of that stuff I'd like to put in the beginning of it too, to kind of show like old world California. And then this kind of led to me shooting, which I can get into. So
I'm also sixth generation
really?
California.
You're the first person I've met that's that far back. I never knew that. See, that's a funny thing about when you talk with your friends, like on a deeper level like this, you learn things that you didn't even know. I didn't know that.
Yeah, my ancestors came over on the Anza Borrego, or the what was it? The Anza like wagon party, and that's what like Anza Borrego and a bunch of places around here.
I know
Anza,
exactly.
Anza Cove, that was one of the family. We weren't
so
the Anzas, we were the Martinezes, but a lot of the Martinezes in California, Martinez, California,
I didn't even know
founded
that.
by one of my ancestors. Yeah, we also his brother. So he founded Martinez, California. His brother owned the Bates Road, the entire Rincon Point.
Huh.
My
grandpa went to
like that
elementary
whole area.
school overlooking Rincon in the 20s. So, and I don't know if you know this, but what school is that? The one in Carpinteria. They took all the Mexican American kids out of the school one day in the late 20s, and that lasted for 20 years. I'll share the book with you later. That's time for another conversation. But my great-grandpa and my grandpa basically helped build downtown Santa Barbara, because my great-grandpa was a bricklayer and my grandpa drove a cement mixer truck. So it's just funny. I feel like it's funny because, we missed 18 minutes of footage, but I feel like even though we had to kind of start all over again, I'm sure there's some other stuff that I can add that I didn't tell you already. So
I think the next thing I asked you about was some of the influences.
Surfing
photography, and I know you.
And how did it start? Well, I've been an artist since I was a little kid. My mom's a very artistic person. Like I said, both my grandparents, my grandpa on my mom's side and my grandma on my dad's side, they were big hobbyists with taking photographs. So I think there was an influence there. Both my grandparents lived very close to the ocean. My mom's parents and the house my mom grew up in on the Mesa in Santa Barbara, it's right up the street from Santa Barbara City College. It's right by Ledbetter, which is, where I learned basically how to surf and go to the beach. And then my other grandparents lived on the sand in Cayucas on 6th Street. Cayucas is 5 miles north of Morro Bay. Most people will know where that is because of Morro Rock. But, I've always been interested, obviously, in the ocean, because not only does my dad surf, but just going to tide pools, hanging out by the beach my whole life. Like, it just one thing led to another, and eventually I picked up a camera at 21, and, a lot of my good friends that I grew up with were really good surfers. A lot of them needed photos, videos, anything for sponsors and that sort of thing. And, one thing led to another, and, then I started shooting. Here we are 26 years later. But you were asking me about influences. My earliest influences would be guys like Ron Stoner. If you guys don't know who Ron Stoner is, please look that up, because he was the most prominent surf photographer, bar none, in the 1960s. Half the covers for Surfer magazine were Ron Stoner. And then the guy basically disappeared in the early 70s, and no one ever knows what happened to him. So he does have a photography book. If you look for it, it's really hard to find nowadays. I have one at my house. My dad does too. And then like Leroy Granis, his stuff from the 60s and 70s was very influential to me. Jimmy Medico, who, even though he's from Texas, he spent some of the most important times of his life in Santa Barbara from 80 to 83. So, Jimmy he just came out with that book, Shaping Surf Culture, and I was actually thanked in the back, which meant a lot to me, because, Jimmy's one of my earliest inspirations, and he told me at the book signing, I was definitely one of the people that pushed him to bring his book to fruition, you know, the last 10 years. And I'm glad he did it. And it was great to go to his premiere in San Clemente last year in September. And then I would say Thomas Campbell's always been a huge inspiration for me. I'm sure we'll show some pictures. Not only his films, but, you know, obviously his film photographs. I shoot 35 millimeter and digital, so he's a huge inspiration to me. Art Brewer, Jeff Devine, Ted Garambeau, Tom Survey. You know, there's a lot of people that inspired me. A lot of the older guys, but, you know, there's younger guys too. You know, even Chris Burkhardt, you know, like we were saying earlier, like, look at how successful that guy has become just from starting by shooting his friends at the beach. And now he's got millions of followers. You know, he's been all over the world. He's gone to these off the beaten track places that no one would dare to go to, you know, 30 years ago. And then, you know, going to these cold water places was probably something that was in his subconscious, but, you know, that's really what put him on the map, I feel like, because you look at that, you know, that photo of him and Josh Mulcoy. We'll just say it's somewhere up in the Aleutian region. We'll cue that picture up, but I mean, that's like a groundbreaking photo, you know? I mean, that's the kind of stuff you like draw in your notebook, but you don't actually think it's gonna come to life. And then, I mean, even if you watch, you know, Under the Arctic Sky, that movie where he's shooting surfing under the Northern Lights, I mean, that's like,
that thing's insane.
I mean, imagine how much work went into that just to get that one photograph. And I mean, you know, they almost got stuck in like a blizzard of all blizzards trying to get that photograph. So yeah, there's a lot of people. Yeah, we were talking about earlier, because we got cut off, the reason I originally picked up a camera and started wanting to take photos of my friends was I wanted to be a writer for Surfer Magazine when I was 15. So I wrote to Steve Hawk, who's Tony Hawk's older brother, and he used to be the editor at Surfer Magazine. And I just asked him, how do you become a writer for Surfer Magazine? It seems like the coolest job in the world. Who doesn't want to go around the world and watch all this amazing surfing and writing about it? And then one thing I took from that was so important was how important the photographs are to the stories. So if you don't have great photographs, it doesn't matter how well written your story is. It doesn't matter because, you know, the magazine's all visual. So from that, it definitely got me thinking into like, okay, well, what can I do here? Maybe I can learn how to take photographs and write the stories. And, you know, one thing led to another. I ended up in film school. But I had a lot of really good friends that are good surfers. So, you know, if you shoot photographs or you film, everybody wants to be your friend, let's be honest. So, especially nowadays, but back then, like, if you had a buddy who wanted to shoot some photos on the beach, that was, like, such a plus. And, you know, I was lucky I had a lot of good friends that not only were good surfers, but, you know, they're handsome guys, so their sponsors wanted, you know, lifestyle shots, and I would always get that sort of stuff. Now we look back at it, and it's such a, what's a word I'm looking for? It's kind of weird to think that back then in like the late 90s, people would tell me to put my camera away sometimes, where now everybody wants content or wants pictures of everything they're doing. And my whole thing was to kind of blend in and make it seem like I'm not there. That's why I think one of my strengths is capturing the moment of people's true personalities, because honestly, like, if you can act like you're just kind of a wallflower, it helps as a photographer. You really get the true emotion of people. So I don't know if that helps.
Yep. One of my favorite images you've taken of me is just me running out to the water. I didn't know you were shooting me, and I'm just running away from you. It was with your psychedelic film.
Oh, that's right.
And I'm just running down to the water.
Psychedelic blues film. You're right. Yeah. That's, you know, what's crazy about that? That was about a week or two before lockdown, wasn't it?
Right before, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I remember that day. That was a very pretty day, because that might have been right after. But remember, You and I were in the water, I believe it was March 9th, 2020, or March 8th. I'll look at my... And then
no way you
we'll
have
show,
that.
We'll show the photo. But remember how beautiful... We're out there... We'll bleep out the spot for Shane, but,
Thank you.
Just kidding. No, in PB. But, a really good sandbar, and it was super glassy and beautiful. And then literally a week later, the whole world's shutting down. And it's like, oh my gosh. So it's like, it's actually pretty cool to know that I have all this stuff documented for so many years that I can look back at it. But I do remember that session. Actually, that was... If you guys don't know what psychedelic blues film is, it's basically 35 millimeter film, and it's got these crazy color light leaks in it, and that's so funny. I didn't know that was one of your favorites.
Yeah.
I'll remember that.
So Steve Hogg gave you some really good advice as a young aspiring surf photographer. Mattson, what's some surf advice you would give to, or surf photography advice you would give to the younger generation trying to get into it?
Well, there was something else I wanted to add to that. Not only did that whole trajectory of me picking up a camera, from him writing me back, but I did submit some slides to Transworld, I believe in 2002 or 3. And Pete Terrace, he's probably my age, he's like in mid-40s. He was the photo editor at the time, and he's still a young guy, but I'll never forget, he wrote me back too, and he just said, you got something here, you should invest in a water housing. But soon after, I got more into videoing than instead of taking as many photos, but I was always documenting behind the scenes stuff. And I look back at it now, and Thomas Campbell, who obviously is one of my favorite photographers, he said something that really hit me, was like, he took all his like paintings and photographs and stuff to this museum when I think he said he was probably like 23 or 4. And this museum owner looked at his stuff and he goes, you got something here, but you'll start hitting your stride at like 38. And he said he felt so offended by that, but I was like, that makes so much sense, because I would say I really didn't start feeling like confident with my work till I was 40, maybe 43, and I'm 46 now. That's a strange thing to say, and that's a long time to get good, but I feel like it wasn't until the beginning of last year, I would say, or I guess it would be, last year. Beginning of 2023, I was like, I've found my style, my niche. I really love my editing. And so my advice to a lot of young photographers is don't let anyone discourage you from picking up a camera and documenting things, because you can do it. You just have to be consistent with it. And I've said this before in other videos, is you don't have to shoot 8 hours a day on the beach, but you should at least, set a limit of, I'm going to shoot 5 times this week, or this is what I'm going to focus on, and just be consistent and learn how to do all these things. Like good editing. You don't need the best camera in the world either. I'm a perfect example of that. I've never had, I would say, high-end gear. I have middle-of-the-road gear, but I have a vision that I'm looking for. And, the big thing a lot of people don't talk about is my community of other fellow like-minded photographers that are a big help, who are a big support. Here in San Diego, a lot of us that shoot the beach and surfing, we all help each other out, repost stuff for each other. We have meetups and all that sort of stuff. And that's really helped me grow more too. I would say the biggest piece of advice I would have is don't listen to anybody that is not doing the same thing that you're doing, because if it's something you're passionate about, just keep doing it. Keep showing up every day. And if you see it in your head and there's a dream there, it will happen, Like, if I told my 21-year-old self, like, you're going to do all these things by the time you're the age I am now, I might not even believe myself. But I've never let anyone discourage me from still documenting the things that I love and that I'm passionate about. So that's been a big driver for me.
That's some really good advice.
Thank you.
Definitely.
I'm getting more serious. I was more joking earlier, but.
And I know you mentioned meetups. I know your subjects have changed a lot over the years when you were younger, you were filming pros like Nathaniel Curran.
Yeah.
But how has your kind of subjects shifted in recent years?
Well, I would say, it started with my friends, who a lot of my friends still surf. I have like a small group of guys I grew up with I've known for 30 years. There's probably about 8 of them or so. And, I still talk to pretty much everyone. And the nice thing about that is it's always still connected us. We still have that in common. I'm always the one that's kind of documenting everything. But, we all rode potato chip shortboards in the 90s, and you know what that is. So one thing I will say for the younger generation now is you guys have so much good equipment available to you. You have no idea like how hard it was to find a fish or a good longboard or anything 25 years ago. It was far and few between, but I would say, it started with that, and then wanting to, shoot my friends that, were competing on the QS, and then eventually, my friend Nathaniel Curran at the time, we used to film, and he ended up making the top 44, which was so amazing to see, like someone you've watched since they were 11 years old, like be successful. He'll be 40 this year. And eventually it led to me, since we've lived here in San Diego, I shoot a lot more with females. And I don't care if someone's a pro level surfer or not. It's just the vibe that I get from everybody. And, all the females are so supportive too. More women have bought my, not only prints, but work or paid me for stuff I've never even asked for, just, for showing up and, just documenting their session. I appreciate it. I don't ask for much. I don't need anything from anyone. So, but it's been nice to create, a community of people that are so kind and willing to share my work too. I feel like that's really, I don't know if we had talked about it or we got cut off, but I feel like my legacy, I always thought my legacy as a photographer or a filmmaker was like through my images and all this amazing surf and swells that I've documented. But I realize my legacy really is through my my relationships and my friendships from surfing and taking photographs of everyone at the beach. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And I said last time, also not sure if it got cut off, but that I thought that was like a really endearing way to look at it, because while the images will technically last longer, the connections you made are a lot more important to you.
100%. And I think too is like, even though my daughter, who's 9, she doesn't surf, she doesn't really care about it, and I don't really care if she does. She likes going to the beach and respects it. She has this whole community of aunties and uncles, yourself included. They're always watching out for her if she's down there and she decides she wants to be surfing. And for me, you come from that core group of surfers like myself. We come from very similar, backgrounds. And, surfing's not like I always find it weird when people call it a sport. Yes, I know there's a competitive sporting aspect, but surfing to me is always about a lifestyle that you choose. And if you're a hardcore surfer, you're going to continue to follow that. I mean, obviously things change as you get married, you have children, you have responsibilities. You're not going to be surfing 6 days a week, 5 hours a day sort of a thing. But, my love of the ocean has never wavered. And even if I don't get in the ocean as much as I can, like, I'm still have that obsession from being a young kid that, I'm never, there's no part of me that's never not, an ocean enthusiast or a surfer, because it's influenced my life in so many ways. The photography is just one aspect of that, but just like, chasing swells and that sort of thing has just been like a cherry on top, I guess you would call it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, it definitely does.
You want to check on that thing?
We are back from starting our camera over. I'm just going to jump right into it.
Okay, jump right in.
So what brought you to San Diego? I know you've talked about the 1998 bars and your $40 weekend. Let's hear more about that.
I'll get into that in a second. But, I'll start with how I originally, found out about, well, not found out about, but, you know, the first time I really came to San Diego was in the fall of '98. One of my best friends, my friend Elijah, lived on the boardwalk in the middle of Mission Beach on Pismo Court from September '98 to June 1st. That's the way all the homeowners on the beach used to do it. From June 1st to September 1st, they would rent out because they would like triple the rent. No. So people that wanted to come from other places that had a lot of money, they could come and rent it out for the summer and pay a ridiculous amount of money. Now I couldn't even imagine how much it would be, but the time they would rent out to college students. Here's something for anyone that is, you know, under the age of 40, probably will never experience, is the fact that, so I asked him yesterday, I'm like, hey, how much did you pay for rent? Because I forgot. In '98, '99, on the, you know, they lived in, it was like a 3-story house overlooking, you know, not only just the beach there in the middle of Mission, but you could see all the way down to the jetty, all the way up to PB Point. I mean, they were on the top level, so you could see everything. And he said they had 1 bedroom, 1 bath. They had kind of like a mini kitchen with like a living room. It was $850. And they split that. So they each paid $425. They each had, him and my friend Ryan, we call him Hody, they had their mattresses there. They split we hardly had anything back then, like as far as clothes and all that sort of stuff. And there's just surfboards in the living room, surf VHS tapes. They had like a little balcony. I have pictures of it, which we will bring it up at some point. But, being able to do that, he said that whole year, the 9 months that they lived there was 1 weekend someone did not visit them. There was someone visiting them every single weekend. You know, and I was 21. I remember one weekend there was 14 of us on the floor. There was literally no space at all for anyone to sleep. It was just kind of a funny thing. So I was joking with you yesterday, ask me about the $40 weekend. So at that time, I used to be a banquet server, and then I was like a part-time bartender at the Civic Arts Plaza. So, every once or twice a weekend, I wouldn't have to work. So what I would do is fill my tank, and back then it was probably $15. Gas was about $1.15 or so in 1998. I know it sounds insane. The most insane and lowest gas I've ever seen. And I think this is why some of the surf exploration of younger people is gone. Dude, it's so expensive just to fill your tank to go to Sano or to Rincon or wherever. And back then it was so cheap. It was, and we didn't have social media or any of that stuff. I mean, the internet was like in its infantile stages, in 98. So, but, I could fill my tank, come down, eat a burrito for $3 or whatever it was back then, like a giant one. I would eat a late breakfast, like at 11 o'clock. We would all nap, have a snack, eat a big, dinner that would be like a Saturday night. Surf all morning on Sundays. And then, I'd have a big lunch, and then I would drive home to Thousand Oaks, which, it's about a 3-hour drive. So that would cost me $40 just to eat 1, 2, 3, like 4 times in the weekend, and fill my tank to go down and come back, $40. I can't even fill my tank for $40 nowadays.
Yeah, mine's like 70 something.
I feel like, I don't want to say, the good old days, but, I think I grew up in a really fun time period. We're kind of, being born in 77, between 77 and 83, they kind of call us a subset, Xennials, kind of like the Star Wars generation from 77 to 83. We kind of had an analog childhood, but a digital adulthood. So, but that was my first experience of like coming to San Diego, seeing how beautiful it was, always wanting to live here. All my best friends pretty much went to college in San Diego, not just San Diego State, but UCSD and Point Loma. And it was funny because I talked to my friend yesterday too. We had snuck into all of the cafeterias at all the colleges at some point from our friends. back then, because none of us had very much money, and just had a lot of fun surfing and hanging out. But eventually it led me to San Diego because I met my wife online. I was living in Ventura in 2011 when we first started talking, and then after we got engaged, she moved to Santa Barbara where I was, and then after a year, I think she missed living here. We decided. I left my job at CI at Channel Island Surfboards, and we came down here. I moved here on February 16th, 2014, which was just 10 years ago, a couple of weeks ago, which is weird to say, but it's the best place to live for me, generally, and personally. Best place to raise my daughter, and, as a photographer, it's one of the most awesome places to shoot. Surfing, waves, the beach, the tide pools, everything. I don't regret a moment of it. It felt weird at the time to leave the 805. I'm sure you felt that too.
Yeah.
You grew up in Santa Barbara, surfing Ventura and all those spots, and you're like, I don't want to live anywhere else. But now that I live here, I could not imagine living anywhere else. There's obviously a lot of places I want to travel to, but San Diego is a very unique, amazing place. The photos I get of La Jolla are as good as anything I could ever imagine myself documenting. It's just, and we've had so many good swells the last couple of years too. It's really helped my work too. I feel like I wouldn't have grown as much as a photographer had we not moved here, honestly. That's kind of the long story to your question, but I hope that answers it.
There's Santa Barbara gets really good. You can get very dreamlike days, empty days, but it's not good very often. And even Ventura, there's waves a lot, but it's windy and bad conditions kind of often. And so, there's just more days to shoot here. You're more 100%. Likely to get a day off when the waves are good.
I heard a really good way to sum it up. One of my friends said, and we grew up surfing all those great waves in Ventura, Oxnard, and Santa Barbara. And he said the best days, the best days at home might rival it here. Because, there's all the really good right-hand point breaks.
Yeah.
But he's like, the consistency of San Diego, it's really hard to beat. I could probably only count maybe 6 or 7 days a year where it's really not surfable, because it's too small. And that's this. If you grew up in Santa Barbara, July and August, you pretty much do not surf at all in town. You got to go north or you got to go south. And it's a good hour drive because, anyone that's not familiar with growing up in that area, the Channel Islands block all the south swells. So you've got to go to Malibu or, go a little bit north to Central California. Some of those spots I won't name, or we'd have to bleep it out. But, and the water's so much warmer here in the summer than it is up there. Up there, if you're lucky, it gets up to 68. A really good, summer of 97, it got up to 70. But, it gets to 76 here. It's really close to Hawaii. It's really hard to beat San Diego, in August and September, how warm it is. And the water's always so clear, too. That's the thing about, Ventura and Oxnard, water's kind of brown. A lot of the time.
Never clears up in Ventura, it seems. I don't know.
Anyone that's ever surfed the Santa Clara River mouth in Ventura knows what I'm talking about. They know how brown it can get, so.
Yeah. Last time I surfed there was a lot of runoff, and I didn't know it till after I'd been out in the water for a long time.
Yeah, and you'd mentioned Star Bar of 98. We got, this year, beginning of 2024, we've gotten a significant amount of rain because of El Nino. And that year I was 20. I turned 21 that summer. And we just had so much rain in January and February. And actually, that was one thing I was going to tell you. I will never forget, around Valentine's Day of 1998, gas was the lowest I've ever seen it in my entire life. It was 89 cents for 2 weeks. The last 2 weeks of February. To this day, I know we will never see that ever again. You can cue it up.
I hope you have a photo documentation of that.
I don't have a photo of that, but I have a photo of where my friends lived. And I don't know, it was just such a different time period too. But, I do like the time period we're living in now because, I'm able to save more time going to the beach and doing the things that I want to do, like picking a really good window when to shoot and stuff like that. And I mean, San Diego's got a lot of surf history too. I mean, a lot of the first best big wave surfers are all from La Jolla because of the reefs, I mean, those are the guys that pioneered on top of the Hawaiians, in the 60s. They were wind and sea guys, surfing at Pipeline, like, Butch Van Arsdale and all those sort of characters. And I mean, Mike Henson, who was in the Endless Summer, there's another La Jolla guy. You got Skip Fry, who's still surfing in his early 80s. I mean, San Diego has a really rich surf culture too. So yeah, I'm glad to be part of it here. And I would never call myself local because I'm not. I wasn't born and raised here, but I do feel like a part of the community now after 10 years. And I'm glad to give back to the surf community as much as I can. Not just with, shooting photos, but just being a part of it.
What was it like working for Channel Islands back in the day?
Oh,
you were kind of there in the heyday.
I call it the golden time, but that was really fun because here's one thing I was going to say is like, we all have that childhood dream job that you want. I got to live that, honestly. My grandparents lived up the street in Santa Barbara from the old shop, on State Street, and then they moved it back over, 2 streets to Helena or Anacapa, sorry. But the original one was on Helena. But, I mean, going into that shop in the early 90s, I'm like, oh my God, how cool would it be to work here? That seems like so out there for someone who's 12, 13, 14 years old. And then sure enough, when I turned 30 years old, they got bought out by Burton a year before it. And part of what they wanted to do was open a store in the heart of Hollywood, which was on Melrose. And I was one of the managers there for 3 years. And actually, I'll show you guys a photo of that. It was pretty cool because they wanted to include the Burton snowboards, and then they ended up acquiring Alien Workshop, the skateboard company and Habitat, and then they had Channel Islands surfboards, and to bring all the stuff together, we had a skate ramp on the roof, we had parties all the time, we had a parking on the roof. This is giant building, every celebrity came in there, which I don't get starstruck. I could care less, honestly. But, I helped a lot of famous people. Every pro skater came at some point to skate the ramp, so that was pretty cool. But getting to, be behind the scenes and see all the boards and get to know everyone, and, we had parties there. And then eventually that led to me applying for my same job, assistant manager. So I ran the sales floor at Santa Barbara, and that was, real special for me because not only I was born in Santa Barbara, my grandparents lived up the street. I've been going into, the CI shop in Santa Barbara for so many years, and then to actually be the one writing up custom orders, putting all the boards away, I was the team manager of our under 18 team for the shop, and doing all that stuff was just such a great experience for me. It was, after I had my daughter, was, my life started a whole new phase. But I would say before I became a parent, that kind of helped prepare me, because dealing with all these kids was such a special thing for me. And a lot of them are still my friends, and a lot of them, personally.
Yeah, I grew up with them.
A lot of kids you grew up with. I mean, seeing them grow up and be successful adults has been really a great pleasure for me, because I'm proud of all those kids, they still check on me all the time because I'm getting older now. So
yeah, you mentioned working with Tom Curran's kid. I'm sure he'd come in all the time.
Yeah, I mean, Frank obviously worked with me at the shop. He's a friend, and Brandon Smith is a good friend, and that's Davey Smith's son. But then we used to joke, hey, aren't you Brandon Smith's dad? And that, I always say this, and it's hard to believe, but man, when I was working there, they made it to the final, how they have the surf shop.
Yeah.
Where the surf shops would surf against each other. Our shop actually made it to the top 8 to Bali that one year. Of course, who had to stay home and manage the shop was me while everybody got to go to Bali. But,
damn.
Man, so many great kids that work there. We're all great surfers too. I mean, and you know a lot of them. I mean, Frank Curran, Brandon Smith, Pat Ecker, who used to be my store manager, he rips, you know. God, and Tavis, who you know.
Yeah. The Ranch Groms were all.
Yeah, I mean, even Adam, you know, Adam Rompierre. He's a really good surfer. Travis, who else? Man, I mean, everybody at the shop. And Evan, who runs the store now, I mean, he's a great surfer and skateboarder. Yeah, the whole crew. It was such a fun time in my life because, you know, I kind of take that role of like surf uncle for a lot of people. I'm a little bit older. So, you know, I was 34, 35 at that time. And, you know, all those kids are 13, 14, 15 years younger than me, but they always kind of saw me as an older brother and uncle type. Like, they all call me Mad Dog, which I always think is funny because I'm like the so opposite of a Mad Dog, but they still call me that. And even though they're grown up and in their 30s, some of them. So, you know, it's a real special time. But I think when we left, it was time to kind of move on and start, you know, my life here and be a dad. And, you know, it led to other things.
Yeah. So I know recently you had a thyroid cancer diagnosis that really changed a lot of things in your life.
Sure. Actually, we saw each other a month before my surgery. So if you guys want to see my scars here, if you need to zoom in, you go on my Instagram and I have a picture of it. But yeah, it's kind of funny. I would say this really leads back to, you know, being a part of the community, like not just as a photographer, but the surf community. Is I found out on, December 5th that I had thyroid cancer and I would need surgery. And 6 weeks to the day, I had the surgery on January 16th. But only, you know, like my best friends and my close family really knew. And then I went public with it and put it out there. So, you know, a lot of people who noticed that I hadn't been at the beach much lately, what was going on with me. And it was a hard thing to hear, but honestly, once I started being more vulnerable and sharing that with people, like that was very, the amount of love I've gotten from people, once I shared that has been really amazing, because I think I was telling you this earlier, but you know, I always thought my legacy was through my photographs, through my videos, through all this amazing work I've been able to create. But honestly, my legacy is through my friendships and my relationships. And once I told everyone that I had cancer and I'm still dealing with it, and I will be okay. I'm 100% certain I will be okay, even though I'm not cancer-free at this point. Like, the amount of love I've felt has been really amazing. And I know so much of that is because of being so giving to everyone else through my photographs and, you know, being part of the surf culture here, and just the amount of love that people have given me, just, you know, DMs, messages, texts, calls, everything. You know, that makes me feel like I'm making a difference. Whether or not I'm the most famous photographer in the world or I'm making millions of dollars, none of that stuff means anything to me. It's if I'm a good father, first and foremost, a good husband, a good friend, a good mentor, a good uncle, that means more to me than anything. Because, like, without people in your life, you know, you don't... sorry. Without the support of everyone, like, it's, I don't know how to say it, but, you know, it definitely makes me feel very cared about and loved here in San Diego, which I'm an outsider, honestly. So to be so important to that part of the culture has been pretty important to me, you know, so I don't know. I didn't want to get too emotional, but it's okay. You know, yeah. I'm an old man, so being a dad, I'm definitely more emotional. But I don't know. It's definitely inspired me to finally tell my story. You know, excuse me. I just gotta clear my throat. But I think shooting for almost 26 years, I've seen so many people grow up over the years from documenting that it's really cool to like see all these people, you know, like Nathaniel's a perfect example of that. Nathaniel Curran, you know, I knew him when he was 11 years old and now he's almost 40, and seen him win the QS and win the US Open. I was so proud of him, you know, because like I was there with him when he separated his shoulder a year before that and his sponsors dropped him, and you know, people kind of gave up on him, but I always knew he had the ability to be on the world tour, and you know, and he's not the only person, obviously, but you know, getting the cancer diagnosis, if it's really taught me anything, it's about being more vulnerable, being more open, because a lot of men, especially men my age, are not good at that. And then I would say the big thing is like I have all this interesting stuff I've been documenting for so many years. I need to start talking about it and telling all these stories, these swells, interesting people I know, because you know, what if something did happen to me and then all this stuff is stuck in limbo, and I would hate to not be able to tell all of that, you know, because I have all this knowledge and stuff that I've been, you know, taking photos of for so many years, like all these great swells. You and me talk about it all the time, and then you always trip out on the fact that you know, I remember days, like I could tell you about, you know, I'll tell you about this one day on December 21st, 2005, which is one of the biggest swells I've ever seen, or the one from last year on January 6th. And like I compare things. I always look at patterns when I shoot, like how can I compare this to something? And you know, the cool thing about shooting waves and surfing is no day is ever the same. Doesn't matter how big or how perfect. Some days just never. Like Hurricane Marie, remember, in 2014? It was just August 27th and 28th. You know, it was a very strong south swell. Extremely rare that time of year, but then just the way that whole swell unfolded, like, and then to be able to document some of it at places I'm not going to mention is really cool. Like I have a friend who always goes, "You have the receipts?" I'm like, "I've got the receipts. I've got photos and videos of everything that I talk about." So I'm always able to back up my stories, which is cool. But I think what I really wanted to say was like, the one thing finding out about, you know, having cancer and then having to deal with this is like my imposter syndrome of like, am I a good enough photographer has gone. I know I'm a good photographer. I'm a good editor. I may not be the best in the world, but I think I've made a difference in other people's lives, which I think is more important. Yeah. And I've been able to document this small part of the world for a small period of time, you know, that was important to me and maybe, you know, a small percentage of people, but, you know, it's just my little subculture that I'm a part of that, you know, it's given me a lot of great friendships and relationships and people reaching out to me and checking on me, and being more open is not easy, but once you like are faced with your mortality, I feel like you want to be more honest. So I just don't care what anybody thinks about me or my work anymore, which I think that's very cathartic and what's the word? It's very liberating to not be in a place now where I'm so concerned with what other people think of me and how I compare myself to other people. I know I'm not going to be Chris Burkhardt. There's only one person like that, you know. Yeah. That doesn't mean I still can't create great work, and you can't, you know, you can also, you know. You know, I ended up getting a little more emotional than I probably thought I was going to, but I think the big thing has been being part of, like, you know, surf culture, small as it is. So, I sort of, the ongoing joke with my wife and my daughter is we can't go to the beach without Daddy running into somebody he knows, because I shoot with everybody. I know everyone, not just shortboarding, but longboarding and just regular everyday people. I think everybody has like an interesting story, or almost everybody you can get an interesting photo of. So the fact that I've crossed a lot of people's lives in a positive way has been one of the best things for me. So, and having, my diagnosis come out and sharing that with everyone, the amount of love that everyone has given me, I greatly appreciate. And I love the fact that you guys even given me an opportunity to do this. It's probably gonna be the longest interview you have of anyone, but I have plenty of stories to tell. So
yeah, no, we really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. And I mean, you're one of my favorite people to run into at the beach, and we'll end up, there's no one else.
I'll know you forever. Don't worry.
There's no one else I'll end up talking to for 3 hours, standing in the middle of PB waiting to head home, and we'll just trade stories and stories. And I'll be like, oh, what was that swell in the late 2000s?
Yeah, no,
when it broke across from Sandbar to the pier. Do you remember what day that was? It was
yeah, actually.
The day I blew my eardrum out, a very significant day in my life. I have no idea what day it was.
Actually, there was. You talked to Jimmy Medico. They had a really big swell in El Nino in '83, and my grandparents lived, right above Ledbetter, and he went up. There used to be you remember there used to be a news station way up there on the hill?
The tower, yeah.
Yeah, so he went up there, and he saw a giant wave come through that basically broke from Ledbetter down to Hammonds. And yeah.
What?
Yeah, I'll show you this picture. It's crazy. He goes, he's like, I was 6 at the time, but I remember like all the boats that were washed up in the harbor on the beach at East Beach, like destroyed. You still remember that stuff. But yeah, I mean, if anybody wants to talk about old swells or wants advice or those sort of things, like I know about it, trust me, you can always reach out to me. I talk about it, and then sometimes people think I'm crazy, but then I always have a reference to share.
And we'll definitely
closing.
We'll definitely have you back on the podcast to talk about significant swells. That's already a planned topic to have you back on.
Talk about surfboard swells.
Yeah.
Important surf films, you name it,
So Mattson, what's next for you? Any upcoming shows, the projects? You already mentioned your book, but any other projects in the work? Anything you want to shout out before we end the interview?
Obviously I appreciate, my community of other photographers, not just men, but women, I have so many great females in my life, not just my wife and my daughter, but, my daughter's a dancer. All the other dance parents have been a big help, through all this. And then, all my surf buddies, especially all my female friends that are close to my own age and, that are always checking on me. I appreciate it. But as far as things I'm working on, I just want to do a book next year. I would like to do a documentary. I have thousands of hours of video footage that I would like to share. And one of my best friends is having an art show this summer in August up in Cambria. My friend Araya, it's ARIAH, like Mariah without the M, Miles, MYLES. I'm going to help him with his show. I don't know. And it's funny because I feel like I had so many things planned out, but I'm just kind of winging it. And I want to do more like videos, sharing more of like my process, sharing more of my knowledge.
So, Mattson, what's next for you? Any shows, projects, things you want to shout out?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, obviously, getting healthy, which I feel pretty good. I still have some more blood tests and other things to do. I won't fully know if, like, I'm pretty much cancer-free until next January, but I think I'm headed in the right direction, so that's going well. But immediate future, I would like to start doing more video sharing, like on YouTube and that sort of thing. Like my process, the things I enjoy shooting, helping other people. And I'm going to be helping one of my best friends, my friend Araya, Orion Miles is his Instagram handle, ARIAHMYLES. He's doing an art show in Cambria at a place called Cruise Control Gallery this summer, and I want to help him promote that and be there with him. And I'd like to talk to the owner so I can maybe do my own show at some point. You know, it's really close to where my grandparents live, so that'd be really cool. And working on putting together my collective, my book. I would like it to be a giant coffee table book, like 350 pages. I don't know. It's funny because I feel like the things that I shoot, it just keeps evolving and changing over time. So, you know, if someone ever wants to either work with me or they have questions, or say you're a new photographer and you need something answered, just reach out to me at Mattson Culbert on my Instagram. I'm sure they'll tag me and all that fun stuff. Yeah. But yeah, my door's always very open to help people, not people that just want to, you know, take. As long as people are respectful, I'm very open. So yeah, just still shooting. I'm confident in my work now, so trying to work more with brands and companies and stuff like that, and anything I can do to help other people too, that's big for me. Like mentoring is a big thing that I like doing, so we'll see what that is. I mean, it's always involving if there's waves, and sharing the places that I really love and care about, and helping my friends, you know, like we have a good community of like-minded photographers here, young and old. So I always like either being a part of or helping my friends. So other than that, just trying to stay healthy and be the best dad I can be, and be a good friend, mentor, uncle, all that stuff. So thank you for having me. I appreciate you guys and you, Shane. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, Mattson. It was a pleasure. Super good to have you
Sorry,
here.
I got a little emotional.
Stoked you could be our first guest, and that's the pod.
Thank you.